Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
Today, we're going where reality gets a little hazy. We're talking hallucinations and visions, the kind that leave you wondering, did that really happen?
Oh, yeah, the stuff of nightmares, but, well, happening in real life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We've got four stories to unpack. A grandmother who swore she saw Satan, a retired teacher haunted by grotesque faces.
Oh, wow.
Then, there's this Japanese man visited by his dead mother, and to top it off, a listener sent in a childhood memory that still chills them to the bone.
Spooky stuff. These stories might seem supernatural at first glance, but I think they tell us a lot about how our brains work, how we perceive the world.
Okay, let's dive right in. Back in 2005, this grandmother, living in a remote farmhouse, woke up screaming, convinced she saw Satan in her doorway. What's weird is she'd never hallucinated before.
Yeah, that's interesting. Makes you think twice about just jumping to sleep paralysis. Have you ever heard of hypnagogic hallucinations?
I haven't.
So it's like this, right? You're in that in-between zone, not quite asleep, but not really awake either. Turns out your brain is super prone to vivid imagery in that state.
So she wasn't fully asleep, but her mind was conjuring up this terrifying image.
Exactly. And
Right.
here's the thing. The content of those hallucinations, they're not just random. They tend to be shaped by, well, our deepest fears, anxieties, and even cultural beliefs.
Right. And this grandmother, she believed it was Satan she saw, this figure that represents pure evil in a lot of cultures. You're saying maybe in that hazy state, her mind tapped into that fear and made it real.
I think it's definitely possible. There's this part of the brain, the amygdala, it processes fear and emotions. Studies have shown it's really active during those hypnagogic hallucinations, almost like your brain's putting on a personalized horror show using your own fears.
That's a chilling thought, and it felt so real to her. Speaking of real, this retired teacher who started seeing distorted faces everywhere, that sounds different, like a whole other type of visual disturbance.
Oh, absolutely. Her case sounds a lot like Charles Bonnet syndrome. It usually happens when people are losing their vision.
Right, I read about that. It's not a mental illness, right? It's like the brain trying to make up for the lack of visual input.
Exactly.
But why faces? Why not, I don't know, pretty landscapes or
Well,
something?
that's the million-dollar question with this syndrome. One theory is that these hallucinations come from, like, a deep well of visual memories we have stored away.
So it's like the brain is digging through old photo albums and pulling out these weird, distorted images to try and fill in the gaps.
You got it. And this woman, she was actually able to draw those faces, so we have a glimpse into what she was seeing. It's pretty remarkable.
It really is. It's like her art becomes this bridge between the world inside her mind and the world we all share. Now, this next story about Tomakata in Japan, it adds another layer to this. He starts seeing vivid hallucinations of his mother, but she had just passed away.
Yeah. Grief is a powerful thing, especially when it's a sudden, intense loss. It can actually change your brain chemistry.
So you're saying his isolation, his grief, it created this perfect storm for his mind to conjure up his mother. Like his longing for her became so strong, it manifested as a hallucination.
It's possible. There's this whole area of research on grief hallucination. We still have a lot to learn, but it's clear that they're deeply connected to how we process loss emotionally and psychologically.
It's like the brain tries to comfort itself, to bridge the gap left by the person we've lost. Even if it's unsettling, maybe it's a way to cope.
It's a very interesting way to look at it. It shows how these hallucinations, even when they seem supernatural, are rooted in very human experiences like love, loss, trying to make sense of things we don't understand.
Before we get to our final story, and I think this one's going to be a doozy.
Yeah.
One of our listeners wrote in about this childhood memory. They wake up and their mother's standing at the foot of their bed. She gives a playful wave, then walks into the closet, but her eye is peering out from the crack in the door.
Whoa, that's creepy. It's like playful, but also sinister.
And to this day, they don't know if it was a dream, a nightmare, or something else entirely. What really gets me is that their mother denied ever being in the room that night.
Wow, that's gotta mess with you. Children's minds are so impressionable, they're still figuring out what's real and what's not.
So could this be a case of an overactive imagination, maybe fueled by those classic fears of monsters in the closet?
Could be. But here's the thing, those early childhood experiences, even the ones we don't remember clearly, they can have a huge impact on us, even as adults.
Makes you realize how much we're still shaped by those early years.
Yeah.
And how much we still have to learn about what's real and what's not.
Absolutely. Sometimes those lines are a lot blurrier than we think.
It's like it makes you question everything you think you know about reality, All these stories, they're so different, but they all kind of blur the line between what's inside our heads and what's actually out there.
You're right, they do. And it really highlights how powerful the brain is. I mean, it can create these experiences that feel so real, even when they completely defy logic.
We've talked about how our fears and beliefs can shape those hallucinations. But I wonder, is there like a deeper reason, maybe even an evolutionary reason why our brains would do that? Why would we be wired for these unsettling experiences?
That's a fascinating question, and one that's had scientists and philosophers scratching their heads for a long time. Some evolutionary psychologists think that our ability to imagine things, even scary things, might have actually helped us survive.
Really? But hallucinations, they can be so disorienting, so scary. How could that be helpful for survival?
Okay, so picture our early ancestors, right? Living in a world full of danger, predators, who knows what lurking in the shadows, being super sensitive to potential threats, even if it meant sometimes seeing things that weren't really there, well, it could have given them an edge.
So like, better to be safe than sorry,
Yeah.
even if it means freaking out over nothing every now and then.
Yeah, exactly. The ones who are more cautious, more attuned to danger, they were more likely to survive, to pass on their genes. So over time, we might evolve a brain that's constantly looking for patterns, trying to anticipate threats, even if it sometimes leads to hallucinations.
So it's like having a super sensitive alarm system, but it
Hmm.
sometimes goes off when there's no real danger. Okay, that makes sense. But why those specific hallucinations? Why terrifying figures, distorted faces, our loved ones who've passed away?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. Our brains don't just passively see the world, they actively construct our reality. They use our sensory input, memories, emotions, everything to create this whole experience.
So it's like our hallucinations are these personalized stories pulled from our own minds, shaped by our past, by our culture, by everything we are.
Precisely. The grandmother who saw Satan, she probably drew on a lifetime of religious beliefs and stories about good and evil. The retired teacher with the distorted faces, maybe those were influenced by early memories or even anxieties about her vision loss. And Tomokata seeing his deceased mother, well, that came from the intense grief of losing her.
It's amazing, really. It's like our brains are master storytellers, constantly weaving these narratives to make sense of the world, both the inner world and the outer world. But then how do we know what's real and what's not?
That's the million-dollar question, right? Philosophers and neuroscientists are still trying to figure that out. But one thing that can help is understanding the context. Like those hypnagogic hallucinations, they usually happen in that twilight zone between sleep and wakefulness when the brain is, more prone to suggestion.
So knowing the circumstances, that can help us make sense of things.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, it's always a good idea to rule out any underlying medical conditions. Hallucinations can be a sign of something else going on.
That's a good point. As fascinating as these experiences are, we shouldn't forget that they can have real-world implications for people.
Absolutely. And even if there's no clear medical explanation, it's important to seek support, to talk to someone you trust. A therapist can help you make sense of it all.
So it's not about ignoring or suppressing these experiences, but about approaching them with like a balance of curiosity and caution.
I like that. Curiosity and caution. We can acknowledge the mystery, but also seek understanding and support when we need it. These experiences, even the scary ones, they can be opportunities for growth, for learning more about ourselves and the world.
This all takes us back to our listener's story about their mother in the closet. What if, besides their childhood fears, there was something more to it, something we don't yet understand?
It's possible, isn't it? We've talked about culture, personal history, even evolution shaping hallucinations. But what if there are other factors at play, things we haven't even discovered yet?
Are you saying there might be things out there, or maybe in our own minds, that we just can't explain with our current understanding?
I'm not saying we should throw science out the window, but I do think we need to keep an open mind. People have been reporting experiences that defy explanation for centuries. Precognitive dreams, near-death experiences, things that suggest a deeper connection between our minds and the world.
It's like we're standing on the shore of this vast ocean of consciousness, and these stories are like messages in bottles, hinting at the mysteries that lie beneath the surface.
What a beautiful way to put it. And maybe by listening to these stories, really listening with an open mind, we can start to chart a course towards a deeper, more complete understanding of what it means to be human.
So for our listener, and for all of us really, what's the takeaway from all these stories of hallucinations and visions?
I think the biggest takeaway is that we can't always trust our perceptions. What we see, hear, and feel is influenced by so many things.
It's a reminder to be humble, to question our assumptions, to accept that there might be things out there we just don't get yet.
And to remember that we're all in this together. These experiences, they're part of the human story. They're born from our capacity for love, loss, fear, and that deep desire to find meaning in the face of the unknown.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? The reality we experience, it's all filtered through our own minds, through our perceptions, our culture, even, like you said, our evolutionary history.
It's pretty mind-blowing when you stop and think about it, and it brings up some really big questions about consciousness itself. I mean, are our minds just like biological machines? Or is there something more, something that connects us to a larger reality, something beyond our individual perceptions?
These stories we've been talking about, the hallucinations, the visions, they make you think those boundaries of perception might be more fluid than we realize. Like, maybe under certain conditions, our minds can access these realms of experience that are beyond our everyday reality.
That's what I find so fascinating and unsettling about these stories. They challenge our whole idea of what's real. They force us to confront the limits of our understanding and admit that there might be things out there, or maybe in here Tap's head that we just can't grasp yet.
It's humbling, in a way.
Yeah.
Reminds us that we're still explorers, figuring out the mysteries of our own mind and the universe. And these stories, even the scary ones, maybe they're like invitations to expand our awareness, to explore those hidden realms of human experience.
I love that. It's like instead of being afraid of the unknown, we can approach it with curiosity, with a willingness to question what we think we know. So, what about our listener? What if someone's having these kinds of experiences, vivid dreams, hallucinations, things that make them question their own sanity? What advice would you give them?
That's a great question.
First of all, remember, you are not alone. These experiences might seem strange or even scary, but they're actually more common than you think. It's just that people don't talk about them much.
It's like there's this whole hidden world of unusual experiences that people are afraid to share because they might be judged or labeled.
Exactly. And that silence, it just creates more fear and isolation. So if you're going through this, find someone you trust to talk to, a therapist, a spiritual advisor, a friend who's open-minded and supportive. Don't keep it bottled up inside.
And it's always a good idea to check in with a doctor, just in case there's an underlying medical condition. Sometimes there are very real, treatable explanations for these experiences.
Right, it's always good to rule those things out. And even if there's no medical explanation, a therapist can help you navigate those experiences, help you integrate them into a healthy understanding of yourself and the world.
So it's not about ignoring or denying these experiences, but about approaching them with a healthy dose of curiosity and, well, maybe a little bit of caution too.
I like that. Curiosity and caution. Acknowledge the mystery, but don't be afraid to seek understanding and support. These experiences, even the unsettling ones, can be opportunities for growth, self-discovery, for appreciating just how amazing and complex human consciousness really is.
We're all part of this vast tapestry of consciousness, each of us with our unique experiences, connected in ways we may never fully understand. And these stories of hallucinations and visions, they remind us that there's still so much to explore, so much to learn about reality and the potential of the human mind.
And maybe, just maybe, by sharing these stories, by talking openly about these experiences that are often taboo, we can create a more understanding and compassionate world for exploring the full spectrum of what it means to be human.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the blurry world between reality and nightmares.
Keep exploring, keep questioning, and always be open to the possibility that there's more to the world and to yourselves than you can imagine.
Until next time, keep those minds open and those imaginations fired up. Good night and sweet dreams.